Hello, Pod Smashers of the Internet, and welcome to another episode of
Pod Smash.
Articulated Exactly How We Both Feel, where gaming goes to grab a beer.
We are your hosts, Penguin and Termite. I'm Penguin.
I am Termite, and we are a weekly video game podcast smashing together all types of different ideas that you care about with video games.
That's right, and tonight we are talking about cultural appropriation, which is our favorite way of making ourselves feel better, and virtue signal. No, I'm kidding. I'm just kidding.
Wow.
Look how smart we are.
All right.
No, I'm literally joking.
Jeez.
Wow, way to start off the episode. Yeah, no, cultural appropriation is actually a really important topic. It's important for everyone to have a good understanding of it, and so we're kind of tackling it. So it's serious, but it's not going to be so serious that we have to issue any trigger warnings, I think, unless you're really, really offended by cultural appropriation. We might be talking about some more adult oriented things, but I don't think it's going to ever be overt. So you should be able to listen with the little ones. All that said, cultural appropriation is what we're talking about today. And so get out your get out your best Twitter arguments, because we're probably going to get something wrong, and we'll probably need you to set us straight. So that's what we're talking about tonight. We'll get more into it later, but we're gaming goes to grab a beer, so we like to talk about what we are drinking tonight.
At this point, I've completely lost track. Oh, we're talking about what we're drinking. I've lost track of all the different Oktoberfests that I've had. I think this is a different one than I've had yet.
No, probably not.
But this is from...
they've all just been Sam Adams Oktoberfest poured into different bottles.
No, they're actually very nuanced. There's a lot of different flavor here.
I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna get a bunch of Oktoberfest bottles. I'm gonna pour Sam Adams into all of them, and you're gonna drink. But you're blind. It's gonna be blind. You're not gonna know it. Yeah. And then I'm gonna be like, what do you think about this one? And you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, this one's like pow in your mouth and blat in your, and then I'll be like, but the other one, that one was more like snah, and you're just gonna be making stuff up.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's all we do. Yeah. That's all we do when we talk about how beer tastes.
Pretentious beer drinkers. That's
it. So this is 13 Pure Oktoberfest from Blue Mountain Brewery. I think that's how you say that. Maybe it's 13.5. Yeah, that's definitely 5. I can't read cursive, folks. They teach us how to do this in 3rd grade, and then you never see it again.
Well, that cursive is dead. There's no...
Well, it's not on this bottle. It's alive.
The point of cursive was to write fast. That's why they developed it, was because it's faster to write in cursive than it is to write in print.
Right, you don't have to lift your pen.
But you know what's faster than cursive?
Typing. Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly. I guess I shouldn't do that for listeners. I twiddled my fingers in the air on the camera. Yeah.
So we're going to reread the bottle, 13.5. I don't know what that means. Oktoberfest. This is an Oktoberfest lager beer from Blue Mountain Brewery. And on the bottle it reads, got your Lenderhosen in a bunch over missing the big fest in Munich? Don't worry, our authentic fest beer is perfectly balanced malts and hops will bring the party to you. Prost. How do you, is that a German
Prost.
word?
Yeah, as
Prost?
a German person, I'm offended. They're appropriating my
I appropriated.
Culture.
Yeah, I did. It certainly
not
did that.
Not you. It's Blue Mountain.
No,
I'm kidding.
They did that.
German people probably have no right to be offended about anything culturally or anything. Yeah, the German people sort of lost their right to complain about that stuff. I am a red-blooded American, though, so I also don't have. I'm doubly.
Whoa. We're gonna do a 23andMe and on you, and it's just gonna be American.
It is
how does that happen?
American and red blood.
Now you just culturally appropriated.
What I did? Red blood,
right? Redskins?
No,
pure-blooded American, native, indigenous.
Yeah, no, that's not what red-blooded American means, is it? No,
I don't know. Although red-blooded American, Revolutionary War, you fought the Brits, so your blood is red. I don't know what that means.
American.
Or does that mean you're a conservative Republican because they associate with the color red?
Oh, no, it's here. I'm just gonna read you what I googled. Red-blooded American is used to describe someone who seems full of confidence or sexual energy.
Oh, whoa. Okay. Is that from
Everyone's
Urban Dictionary?
blood is red. No, it's just it's from the Cambridge. It's from Cambridge.org.
All right. Nice.
Everyone's blood is red. It wouldn't be racist to say, in fact, quite the opposite. Describing one's as red-blooded is just describing one as a person, because everyone's newsflash, everyone's blood is red. So,
what?
Now,
No
if
way.
we ever make first contact with the Vulcans, then calling someone blue-blooded would probably be a racist or
You
culturally appropriated
blue-blooded.
thing. That's so
Pointy
racist
eared
to Vulcans and or elves.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
So mine's fast though, and that's why I decided to take so much time talking about my confidence and sexual energy.
You suck. I hate you.
After all that, I'm drinking a Sam Adams Oktoberfest.
I haven't had one of those yet this year because I've been on the journey of Oktoberfest.
Yeah, you've been on your
Sam
little
Adams.
pretentious journey of Oktoberfest that your friend got you on.
It would be pretentious if I said Sam Adams Oktoberfest is so bad I have to try everyone else and not do that by protest. And I love Sam Adams Oktoberfest.
Levels of pretension. I think there are levels. This is the spectrum.
I like to think of this as a journey of me trying new flavors instead of just defaulting to Sam Adams for Oktoberfest.
I get it.
So thank you, friend of the show, Sean, for criticizing and being pretentious.
Guys,
no,
I didn't say Sean was pretentious.
He was. Oh, he is.
Okay.
Yeah, no. Yeah, he was.
Yeah, you're allowed to call your friend pretentious. I'm
right,
not allowed to call your friend pretentious. I am sick, guys, so I have no idea how this episode's going to go, and I hope that in my virus-addled state, I don't say something stupid, but I hurt all over. So that's what I want to talk about, but not for long. I just wanted to talk about it right now is how sick I am. My child started preschool, and I think I told you before we started, is I still have a cough from the last bout of sickness he brought into the house from that petri dish of a preschool. And I now am hitting this presumably new sickness. And dude, I usually get sick like once a year. If I get sick twice in a year, there's like a good month or two between. And it's during the absolute like sickest months. I just survived through a global pandemic without getting like sick more than like 2 or 3 times, like colds. And now I have not been sick with this much or this little time between sicknesses since like I was in the petri dish myself, in the petri dish of public education myself. So I guess this is technically private education, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's still a bunch of gross children touching each other and coughing on each other. And now my child comes and touches and coughs me. And I get it. I get why they then are up all crying all night, because if this is how they feel and I'm an adult and I'm going to be crying all night, then I get it. My kids, I get it. It still sucks. That's where I'm at.
Yeah.
That's what I'm at like tonight.
And I mean, there's scientific evidence to show that our immune systems, like after the pandemic, us being isolated and masked and separated for so long,
which is good. All good things. It's all those are normal things that we should do. The fact that we've now stopped doing them and are getting sick, it's kind of on us, right?
That's what I'm saying. Like, now we're all kind of back to normal. It's a fall season with influenza and other things going rampant. Now our little society's weakened immune systems are like ripe for the taking, and so here we are, getting sick 3 times in one summer.
In a happier turn of conversation, I'll say another thing that's happened for the first time since I think I was a kid is it is September. It is like 3 or 4 days after the autumnal equinox. It is officially, at least calendar wise, it is now fall. And for the first time, I think since I've been a child, it actually feels like it's starting to become fall out there. It's crisp
it's kind of early
nights, crisp evenings. I'm starting to even see some leaves change. And guys, I don't know if I've harped on it enough. It's Virginia. This doesn't happen. So I'm very pleased that this year's the weather, this turning out this fall, because usually we're halfway through October and we're still like, oh yeah, it was 85 degrees today. And that was fun.
Yep.
So that's why I'm drinking. That's why I'm drinking. That's just bring it full circle. That's why I'm drinking the Sam Adams.
Yeah, it's perfect.
It's feels like fall. So all right, we have time for a little bit of one more non-topic bantery topic before we jump into our segment. So what do you want to? Is there anything you wanted to bring to the table?
There was a fun little debate about who's a better father, Joel from Last of Us or Kratos from God of War.
We had this debate.
Yeah.
and it's Kratos.
That's what I thought too.
Like,
Yeah.
granted, Joel is Joel. I think Joel acts the way that any father would act in his circumstances. Any father figure. Kratos acts the way few fathers ever act, and that is to own up to his mistakes and try to do better. Own up to his shortcomings and try to do better.
Yep.
Joel, unfortunately, spoilers, never does. He never gets to. He does, like I said, something that is completely reasonable, understandable, but he never gets to own up to. I think he apologized to Ellie for. I'm trying to remember in Last of Us Part 2 if there was ever like a scene where he.
There was a lot of like flashbacks in Last of Us Part 2 to give you that gap between 1 and 2.
Right,
that,
right.
Like,
and she like
Ellie
confronted
left.
him about it and all that stuff. But like,
and you didn't really know till the ending of Last of Us Part 2 exactly what transpired, so don't spoil that part.
I just don't remember. I'm blanking on it right now. But nevertheless, like, it doesn't matter. If he did own up to it, he didn't own up to it in a way that was really like in time to change anything. Whereas with Kratos, he like actually like changed the course of his son's life more than likely by doing the like hard introspective work that all fathers need to and should do. And that's why that's my answer, for that simple reason. So
quick.
Easy. Kratos, easy.
I will say I'm playing Last of Us Part 1. That's what brought it to my attention. That's why I care now. And I'm excited about God of War. That's why everyone's talking about it now. But as a dad, I haven't played that game since 2013. That was 2 years before my son was born. Mm-hmm. And so like it hits different. Different.
I bet. I mean,
there's one scene.
Yeah,
oh my
you
goodness.
and I talked about this though. Where like you didn't play Last time you played Last of Us, you weren't a dad.
Yeah.
Last time I played God of War, I wasn't a dad.
Yeah.
It still hit me in the feels. And then The Last of Us Part 2, I did play after being a dad, but it doesn't deal with fatherhood or parenthood the same way.
Yeah.
Exactly. So no, right now I'm getting the feels from Plague's Tale because you're technically playing as like a teenage girl, and but it's the fact that the kid is like 4 years old, 5 years old. He's only a few years older than my son, and he's put in this like terrifyingly awful circumstance, and it's just like, I want to hug you, child. I just want to love you, child. Make you feel happy, because it's a great game. It's excellent, but like it's got its own heaping share of misery. So it's like, take The Last of Us, throw it into 12th century France, and then like ratchet everybody's age down by like 70%, and that is Plague's Tale. Yeah, instead of a like 40-year-old dude, you're a 14-year-old girl, and instead of you're basically Ellie's age and escorting, and you have to be the responsible parent one, escorting like literally a baby around for all intents and purposes, like a toddler.
Wow.
It's pretty intense. Great though, very good game.
I want to play it. Sounds great.
It's good. You should. It's really quick. I say it's really quick, and I'm still like 2 weeks in and haven't. Because so much.
I know The Last of Us is a lot shorter than I thought it was. Where I'm at in the game with how little I've played it, I'm like, oh yeah, I guess this is it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But is that game, Last of Us Part 1, a lot of people have questions about, was it worth remaking? Absolutely. Is the game amazing on PS5? 1,000%. It's incredible, and it's totally redone. And
the thing is, I'm just willing to wait for it to go on sale. Like,
bingo! That was my next point. Is the price? Is it $70? That's so expensive.
It is. So, that's PlayStation. I mean, I'm a pretty like understanding guy, and honestly, I think, like I said, video games should be priced higher than they are now for premium games. But that's if all things are equal. That's like, that argument was, legit, 4 or 5 years ago before Game Pass came out, right? And now, or rather, while Game Pass was coming out, maybe I could have still made the argument up to that point when it was still untested. But now, like, Microsoft's changed the landscape now, and it's really, really hard to justify $70. It was hard for me to, like, I bought a $10 off coupon and still paid $60 for God of War. Pre-order, or for the pre-order, and I'm like, man,
that was worth it though.
That will be worth it for sure.
Yeah,
I agree, and it's probably more than $70, but it's still hard to sit there and say. Just when you just see the comparison, you're like, but if that came out on Xbox, it would be out day one for Game Pass. That just I get the narrative, like Sony is falling victim to the narrative in this case, which is, and we've already talked to death about this, but it's that they are nickel and diming their player base, and it doesn't help that games like Last of Us, as good as they may be, it's different from Final Fantasy VII Remake, because Final Fantasy VII Remake was an entire remake. It was like an entirely new experience. It was,
and there's also like
essentially
20 years between the two.
Exactly. Yeah, right.
30,
it's
30
it's
years?
a game that could have only been made now, and they redid it. Whereas like The Last of Us Part 2, even if it's like a new engine, new assets, whatever, it's still, correct me if I'm wrong, basically the same game. Like they don't add anything new to it, right? There's no new content. There's no new
is the
mechanics.
Same, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean is like, okay, cool. Well, I've played that content a scant like 4 years ago. I'm not dying to pick it up again, and they're not bringing anything new to the table to make me want to pick it up again. So, and then I'll re-experience it for a third of the price.
Yeah. It's definitely going to be one of those sale games of Black Friday that I highly recommend. Yeah. Jump on it. Get it.
Cool. I say that we skip favorite things and go to DLC, since we skipped DLC last week.
Oh.
And I'm sick, so nothing is good. There's no good. Everything is bad.
Okay.
All right, so yeah, let's do that. We're gonna skip favorite things and go right to our last segment before our main topic, which is
DLC.
DLC is downloadable content.
Because our names are Dan, both of us.
Yeah.
That's why we go by Penguin and Termite.
Yeah, you pick it up. You pick it up. Explain.
Yeah, so DLC is a little side content, because DLC is also the acronym for downloadable content on video games, which is a little extra piece of content that costs extra, ratcheting up the energy here.
I was gonna say we're operating on such a high level, but I can't even say that because I'm so operating on such a low level right now.
Yep. So that's our DLC. It's a little segment of our show where we do a little bit, a side game, a gig, a thing that may or may not be related to our topic, and we have some fun. And except for you listeners, it's just as much money as the main content, which is nothing, zero, free, no ads.
Pulling this one out of my butt has nothing to do with our main topic, which is, again, probably good because, it's probably good because of just where my head is at right now. I need to do something entirely unrelated.
Your head is throbbing and pounding.
I'm gonna. This one is inspired to me in honor of your not so dramatic mid-game arrival in D&D this past weekend when you got to finally play again with me, but you had to be late. And I approved of that, but it was really funny because you messaged me multiple different ways, so much so that I had to catch up on all the different messages you sent me, because you thought that we had talked about you coming in if we were in the middle of combat, it should be a dramatic moment where you come in and stab a dude, and get an instant kill or something. Yeah, it just wasn't. They were at the time they were wandering around a encampment knocking on the doors of frog people houses some messed up trick-or-treating, and I'm like, dude, no, this is
knock. Who's there? Isoptera.
You should have
Isoptera is my character name.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which is, you want to give them the fun fact? What's Isoptera?
No, what? There's
it's
a fun fact.
A scientific name for termites. This is Isoptera.
Oh yeah, I
forgot or whatever. Yeah. Come on, that was my
completely.
Creative,
it was great. And it came in and went. I forgot. My bad.
So right. So in honor of that moment that should have been a moment but was actually a non-moment, what is pick me a character from pick me a character. I'm gonna pick a scene. That's what we'll do. I'm gonna pick a scene from a piece of fiction where a character comes in the 11th hour and saves the day, and you're gonna pick me a video game character, and we don't know what each other's gonna pick, and we're gonna see how that plays out with each other's picks. So you have your character?
I do have a character.
Good, because I'm going to go with a classic here, and I'm going to talk about, so there's so many in this work of fiction to choose from, but I'm specifically going to choose the moment where in the third Lord of the Rings movie / books, where they're fighting in Minas Tirith, they're at the siege, they've got the siege, and then The specifically again, this similar but a little different than the one in the Two Towers, but this time over the fields of Pelennor, the king of Rohan and Theoden and the whole army are there with the horses, and he has the speech, and it's awesome. That scene, that one over Aragorn or any of Gandalf's.
Wow, my pick might be perfect.
Catastrophe, that's what it's called.
So you want to replace Theoden with
with the video game that you character.
Excellent. We're also going to replace his entire army. So
Perfect.
erase all of the horses. And
all
here it comes. It is Captain Olimar and his army of Pikmin.
You can lines of dialogue. That was so good.
That's so amazing.
Good. I almost feel like that would just have won the day, right? Like just the Witch King, the big battle with the Witch King. Captain Olimar is like getting smashed by the Witch King, and then like a little Pikmin comes over and with a helmet, and the Witch King says, "No man can kill me," and the Pikmin goes, "No." Stabs it with a leaf or whatever right through his face. I love it. That's it. That's the scene.
And all of the Pikmin have like the different elements, and like I know in Smash Bros, Olimar throws them, and that's kind of how. And you sort of do that in the Pikmin game, but in the Pikmin game, you more like command. The army
command
to do
them,
things.
and then
so the Pikmin
they're
more
gonna
like. Yeah,
I see them like building little ladders and climbing up the elephants or whatever, and just like dragging them down. That's great. That's fantastic. Wow, that was a good one. We should do that one more. Do you know what that's called, by the way? That as Tolkien actually coined the term for when someone comes in sort of at the 11th hour. It's not a Deus Ex Machina, because a Deus Ex Machina comes out of nowhere. Whereas this term called Catastrophe is it's like the characters they're coming, but are they going to get there in time? And then they come right in the moment where they're most needed. That's called Catastrophe. And it's a term Tolkien coined. It's neat. I mean, it's all over those stories, right? Like, the eagles, they're here. Yeah, that's but it's great. It works every time, and it's so good. It's so good. It always works.
Yeah,
it's like it never gets old until someone else tries to do it, and then they're like, "No, you're not Tolkien. You can't have black hobbits," which I'm saying people on the internet say about Rings of Power. And I'm not saying I will not defend Rings of Power as some amazing Lord of the Rings story, but it's not bad. It's not great, but it's not bad. It's entertaining and watchable, and quite frankly, its production value is leagues beyond the Hobbit movies, right? Like, so, like, at least they have practical effects in that.
People hate the Hobbit movies. I love those things. They were great. But I'm so easily entertained.
First one, I liked the first one, and I liked every scene with Smaug in it, because Benedict Cumberbatch is great even when he's playing a CGI dragon.
Yeah.
But there is so much, just like it looks like you're watching a video game is what it looks like.
It does kind of look that, it's got the CGI. But
compared to the practical effects. That's why I say Peter Jackson is not Tolkien returned. Peter Jackson showed us exactly what kind of movie he would have made if he had made Lord of the Rings in 2010, and it would look like a video game, right? It would have been garbage. He made Lord of the Rings at the perfect time, which is when they had enough CG to make it work.
Yep.
But also they didn't have good enough CG to rely on it wholly, so they had to do practical, or rather CGI was still so expensive that they still had to rely on practical effects for normal shots, and it worked. They had miniatures, they had actual sets of armor, they had incredible landscapes, and then they just did green screen in freaking Hobbit, and it's so disappointing.
But that's not why we're here tonight.
That's not why we're here. We're not talking about those things. We're not talking about actually New Zealand cultural appropriation will come up tonight.
Oh, nice.
In one of our examples. Yeah.
Okay.
So we're talking about cultural appropriation. We're talking about different cultures. We're talking about specifically cultural appropriation in gaming spaces. But let's start by getting on the same page as to what cultural appropriation is and why it's a negative thing. But we'll also talk about what isn't cultural appropriation, so that we're not, so that we're on the same page. We know that both us and the listeners
and what isn't.
What is and what isn't, right? We set those boundaries. So why don't you start, since I feel like I've been talking
I'm just gonna, you just like you've defined all of these things for me. on the notes, so I will transcribe those. What's the opposite of transcribing? Transcribing is when you type or write what you say.
Translate.
So the opposite of that is just reading. I'm an idiot. Okay. Well,
I mean, there's absolutely a term for that has trans in it, but yeah, reading also works.
But I don't want to. I'm not reading your notes verbatim. I mean, I will, but I'll put a little zhuzh in there, a little termite. So appropriation. Termite. Look, you put appreciation, but appropriation.
No,
is
no,
when
because no.
Oh, I should read that quote.
Yeah, this is from greenheart.org, and I like this as my favorite definition of it, because it contrasts it with appreciation, and says appreciation is when someone seeks to understand and learn about another culture in an effort to broaden their perspective and connect with others cross-culturally. Appropriation, on the other hand, is simply taking one aspect of a culture that is not your own and using it for your own personal interest. You could add a bunch of addendums there, but I feel like that's a basic, right?
Yeah,
one or more. I would say take one or more aspects of a culture, but it's basically like you're boiling it down to its simplest form, either for your own personal interest being because you're lazy and you don't care enough to actually invest time and energy it takes to learn, or because you're just like, I'm trying to make a quick buck, so we're going to make a game about Amazonian, like Amazon, the people, the tribes in the Amazon, but we're not going to go like live with them and learn from them and research them. No, we're just going to be like, they clearly wear nothing but like banana skirts and like banana leaf skirts and coconut bras, and that's probably what people in the Amazon wear, right? Like that is appropriation. Now, I'm saying that as an example. I don't actually believe that, so please do not like take that sound clip and like cancel me on the internet, because that was an example of cultural appropriation. That is not what I believe or think. Just throwing that out there. Okay, talk.
Yes. All right. So there's a bunch of different types and how this comes out, what it looks like, and one of these examples is fetishization. Quote, isn't this cultural thing so weird and different? Look how exotic it is. And you just take it and use it. It's one of those cheap ways of like utilizing another culture for yourself, for your own personal gain. And I kind of
it's not like fetish as in like the thing that adults like. It's not an adult. It's not in this context. Right. It's not an adult thing. It's explicit. It's basically being like, look how exotic this is, right? It's saying that like, oh, this culture is so weird and exotic, and basically saying, look how inhuman it is. It's basically like making them into zoo animals and saying, wow, this is such a thing that is to be like, it's turning it into entertainment, turning an entire culture, people's way of life, and being like, this is entertaining. It's because it's so exotic. It's very Western, very colonial.
Yeah.
And that leads us to our next one.
Colonialism, boiling down a culture to its most simplistic elements and positioning that culture as an enemy to be conquered by, and most likely westernized character. This is problematic because when you colonize another group of people, you immediately label them as subpar to you, and your ways are better, and they just don't know, or they're ignorant, and you need to impart your own ways upon them and teach them the correct way to live.
Yeah,
that is colonialism.
Western cultures are not the first ones to colonize or the first ones to conquer, but Western civilization is still one of the biggest offenders of colonization, and if not the most effective colonizers. And I'd say that in a bad way, right? Not like saying like, yeah, look at us, how awesome, like look how great Great Britain was, and by extension America. Like, no, they were ruthless colonizers of this world, and their mark will stain us for centuries, if not millennia, in regards to just how terrible our colonization of this world was. I say our, even though I am an American, but like we're an extension, right? Like, and we didn't, and it's like, as a colony that rebelled against that, we still didn't learn from that, and instead turned around and began
manifest destiny.
Right, exactly. It's like, it's ridiculous. So yeah, colonization is basically when the West basically says, well, it's like you said, in a form of American exceptionalism. It's, we're the best, and everybody else is beneath us. So therefore, all of our things are the best, and yours are either fetishized, like, ooh, entertaining, or just no, like, we're gonna exploit this now. Is basically colonization.
And then like that comes with like the arrogance of saying our way of life, we know what we're doing. Clearly, yours is not, and so it's arrogant. Like, you just feel like, oh, and then you can go into like the idea of you're doing them a favor. You can almost like make yourself appear to be like this hero. Like, oh, I am colonizing them. I am making them civilized. I am teaching them manners. I am teaching them the correct language.
I think of like,
ugh, it's infuriating.
I think of like a weird example of this in video games that I just realized is Assassin's Creed 3. It's like, on the one hand, it's like, look, guys, we're doing a game about the origins of America, but it's a Native American. But then that Native American goes and like assassinates people in order to establish America, the country, the westernized country, right? Like the very country that would then go on to, oppress them with Manifest Destiny. That's colonization. That's saying like, look, like it's basically like rewriting history to say like, look, the Native Americans were so cool with this that they would have helped us win our independence from Great Britain. Even if that may be the case in some lives of those Native Americans at that time, it still seems exploitative to be like, yeah, no, 100%. We're just going to take for granted that they too wanted America to be established. It's like, no, that's not the case.
Yeah.
They wanted to be free and autonomous as well. And we stole that from them and then have the audacity to come and exploit that later for our own entertainment. Yeah, fun.
Well, I don't know. There's an article that says Assassin's Creed 3 is actually one of the good ones for
Really?
like getting cultural appropriation
wow.
correct because of the people they worked with. Like Ubisoft actually went out and got people from that culture and like Native American history and all those things. So I think what you're offended by or what you're criticizing is actually like just the accurate depiction of the things that happen.
Maybe, but maybe not. We also have the luxury, the fact that we have the luxury of being able to do that.
That's privilege,
right?
Yeah,
it is privilege, right?
Absolutely.
Like we don't,
absolutely.
We're like, it's weird to me. It just still seems kind of weird, right?
Yeah.
The fact is, they didn't ever do anything like that again, and that's got to say something, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, then there's just sort of the general uninformed, uneducated / ignorant kind of version of this, where it's just like you just don't understand the culture and you're representing it in its most basic form. So I think of there's numerous examples we were talking about earlier, but like think of like Night Wolf. While we're on the Native American train, right? Like Night Wolf from Mortal Kombat, he's like, look, he's clearly like a spirit walker because that's all that Native American people are, and he throws tomahawks because that's the only weapon Native Americans know how to use. So like, there we go, boom, like Night Wolf. Now we have a Native American character, guys. Look, isn't that so cool? Like, it's just like, no, you don't know anything about the culture. You just think you know about the culture, and then you decide to go forward full speed ahead with your ignorant position as opposed to a educated one. That is another flavor of this, another version of this. So, you want to do the next one? This one's a big one.
Whitewashing. Portraying characters from a culture in a way that is not true to the racial realities of that culture.
Like Christian Bale playing Moses. that is a thing that happened, and you want to know when that movie came out? It was like 2016. It was.
Oh, was that new? Really? I didn't even know that happened. That's funny.
Yeah, it's called. I don't even remember what it's called, but go ahead.
There's also Ghost in the Shell.
Oh yeah,
Scarlett Johansson. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yep. That was another that's 2017 recent example of that.
You see, that one's. I mean, I don't like it, but that one's a little different because, Japanese people don't see Japanese anime characters necessarily as inherently Japanese.
Yeah.
It is a weird it's a slightly different cultural phenomenon for Japanese people as it relates to anime. Now, if it was someone like Joker from Persona, where the character was specifically Japanese, right? He lives in Japan. He's from Japan. That's a little different from a character in like a sci-fi show that's ambiguous about where they're actually from. I also think of like Full Metal Alchemist, where they're like clearly portrayed Western because they're meant to be Western characters, right? That's
gotcha.
what they're meant to be. And so because Japanese people we have like that claim ownership of it, but still, nevertheless, it still should have been written and signed off on, right? I would feel less weird about that if that movie had been written by a Japanese writer who then cast Scarlett Johansson because that's how he envisioned the character. He or she envisioned the character. Yeah.
That would make sense.
So there are some weird nuances with this whole thing, but nevertheless, to our last example before voice cracked. What am I, 13? I must be sick. Let's hear our last example before we talk about sort of like boiling this down to
tokenization. Having one character represent an entire culture to score representation points.
South Park one for that. Yep.
It is. Yeah, South Park did great with the token black man.
Named Token is exactly. He is a satire of tokenization.
Yep.
But I also always think of token whenever
Yeah, me too.
tokenization comes up.
Yeah.
No, it's there are just so many examples of this. It really happens a lot with. Again, there's a reason why they call it the token black guy, is because it's like, oh look, he's the black guy. He's like, his introductory song is rap music because that's all that black people listen to, right? Like, again, these are not Penguin saying these things. This is Penguin quoting ignorant people that he imagines say these things. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So
identifying the problem of tokenization is what you were doing.
Yep. So cool.
Yep.
To me, I think that, like, I thought labeled as a Penguin thought. To me, I think that if you're still confused after all that as to kind of what cultural appropriation is, to me it boils down to two things. If you are genuinely like it's sort of humility versus arrogance. If you are approaching the topic of a culture, of a people group, and you're coming from it from a like, I know nothing, please teach me, and you do the work as long as it takes to actually feel like they believe that you can speak to it, right? Like you go and you say, teach me, I don't know anything. You let them teach you, and then you let them tell you when you're ready, right? Like that to me is like is sort of the quintessential I genuinely appreciate this culture and am trying to represent it honestly and true. Doesn't mean it's going to get everything right, no, but it's going to be something that those people who you are trying to like borrow from can be proud of, to say, yes, that is a good representation of us, because they took the time to learn. Whereas appropriation is, I don't care, I know it, I got it, I'm good, like sweet, I know everything there is to know about X culture, X people group. Boom. This happens with more than just, by the way, racial groups. It happens with LGBT groups. It happens with trans groups, right? Like people coming in and being like, sweet, I'm going to take these icons just because they work for me. Lord Almighty, the rainbow flags, right? Like the rainbow flags plastered all everything during Pride Month is a form of cultural appropriation. It happens with religions, taking religious iconography and reducing it to its like most basic parts, or exploiting it for your own gain. That's all cultural appropriation. But let's sort of, again, finish putting our little boundaries on this conversation and talk about what isn't cultural appropriation. Do you want to do this one?
Sure. Much like racism, it rarely flows upstream along power lines, meaning reverse appropriation is usually not a thing. A game made by an oppressed culture that is criticizing their oppressors is not cultural appropriation. Power dynamics between cultures plays a huge role in what is and isn't cultural appropriation. Punching down and punching up, like comedians
like in
would never
comedy, yep.
like a comic on stage.
Yeah, so it may seem like a double standard to people,
right?
And I get where you're coming from, right? Like, well, then how come they can appropriate our culture? How come they can appropriate white culture, whatever, and make fun of it or reduce it to its most basic elements in order to, like Karens, right? Like making fun of Karens, right?
Yeah.
I think Karen jokes are absolutely hilarious, but Karens get really upset when you call them Karens and make fun of them. I could see a Karen being like, well, how come you're appropriating my culture, my suburban white addicted to opioids, like soccer mom culture? Like, isn't that a cultural appropriation?
You just did because it too. That's what's funny.
I know, I did. No, because I guess I am punching down because I'm in a. No, I don't know about that. Do I have more power than a suburban mom as a white man? I don't know. Probably yes. Actually, the answer is probably yes, because white men tend to have more power than even white women. Doesn't matter.
Unfortunately, so.
Bottom line is, the point is, no, it doesn't really. It's not really that. It doesn't really work that way, because cultures who are oppressed, people who are oppressed, should have the right to criticize their oppressors. And if they do that through satire, through comedy, through, and let's just say it, appropriation, that should be a tool in their kit that they can use to criticize them in order to invoke and inspire change. That is a tool that should be available to all oppressed groups. And so yeah, no, sorry, it does. The power dynamics play a huge role in this. And just like in comedy too, just like in satire, punching down is a thing that should not happen. Punching up is a thing that can happen, may not be the most tasteful thing, may still ruffle feathers, but at the end of the day, you can't really label it appropriation because it's not necessarily what it is. So cool. Obviously, we talked about appreciation already, right? Like, just if you like stories and aesthetics from other cultures, right? Like, it's fine. Put your little like Zen rock garden in the thing. It's not appropriation, because you're just enjoying something that another culture made. That's fine, right? None of us would be able to shop at what's it called?
Lidl?
IKEA. Or
IKEA?
Lidl, right? Yeah, or any of
Aldi?
those. Yeah, exactly. I was thinking of IKEA because and get that sweet Swedish furniture. That was appropriation. It's like it's okay to like things from other cultures, right? Like that's fine, right? Just don't be like, so this is my Zen garden. I made it because I'm awesome, and I'm so like. If you then start like bragging about it on social media to create some air of like, look how culturally savvy and interesting I am, like then you're exploiting it, and then it
Yeah.
becomes appropriation. So if you just quietly enjoy it in your own privacy, that's fine. If you start being exploitative about it, that's not fine. So
Yeah.
cool. All right. Whew, that was a lot. How have video games been guilty of cultural appropriation, and what are some of the worst offenders?
One of the worst offenders ever is actually one from our childhood, and that's Oregon Trail.
Oh my gosh.
Ridiculous stereotypes.
Yeah.
Completely actively promoting stereotypes in all ways of Indigenous Americans, Indigenous peoples. Yeah, they were just caricaturized. They were, I think you all understand if you've played Oregon Trail where I'm going with that.
Yep.
Yeah, all the problems there.
Yeah. A more recent one is Overwatch. Like they have a lot of very. It's oftentimes because the story is paper thin in Overwatch, and but they'll create these characters and be like, look, this character's from New Zealand. They're coming back to New Zealand. This is a character like from New Zealand. Look at, and then they'll take all these Maori influences or Pacific Islander influences and like slap it on. Now this is one of his cool skins. Look, he's got like a shark head and like a Maui hook, and it's and it's like this is clearly a white character. Like, but he's from New Zealand. It's like, yeah, but he's not like a Maori. Like he's not portrayed as Maori, like or Maori. I don't know. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that. But and then similarly, there is a Native American. A couple of Native American characters that are portrayed in as Native American, but still they'll be like, here's now their like cool Thunderhawk blaster rocket armor, and it's like, oh, it's distasteful. It's distasteful when done by like white dudes, right? Like clearly white dudes in Blizzard Entertainment, and it's like, here's our, and again, this is the same group that did the algorithm, and now they have a new character like a Kiriko, the Japanese ninja healer with her spirit wolf. It's like, what, guys, stop! This is really reductive. So yeah, that's been a pretty controversial one.
There has been a lot of misrepresentation of Islamic culture and Islamophobia across various Call of Duty and Battlefield modern warfare type games.
It's like they don't even bother me when they don't bother me as much when they're depicting actual conflicts, but when they're like, okay, so we're going to do just like a completely fictional airport terrorist attack. And like the game was made between 2001 and 2012. I guarantee you I could like probably guess in at least 2 tries what race those terrorists were depicted as.
Problematic for sure. I also think Street Fighter falls into this with characterization, a caricature, right? That's like a goofy representation. A lot of fighting games do this, but like Dalsim, he's the Eastern yoga fighter that has the long stretchy arms because of yoga. And so like he's got skulls around.
Gosh, I forgot about that. That's his superpower is yoga. Oh gosh, that's so wrong. Oh man.
And then like Blanca, who is from Brazil, happens to be a beast man who growls and grunts, and that's like Brazilian people are not white, so brown people are just animals that groan and grunt.
Of course. Right. Brazil, it's so exotic. That's so far away and exotic. It's literally just like south of the Gulf of Mexico from us, right? Like, like Florida people could probably drive a boat there in less time than it would take for me to get to Maine. But it's Brazil. They gotta be crazy. Yeah.
And if you notice, like the white people in Street Fighter are normal. Ryu, he's a regular Japanese, martial artist.
Normal, like nuanced, interesting people too, with character, with different like backgrounds and interests and beliefs.
Ken and Guile and Chun-Li, they're all normal people. But you start getting into the non-white games, folks, and
fighting
even Zangief is normal. But it's bad.
It's also really odd too to me when like games developed by people of other cultures, in this case Street Fighter being Japanese developers. I guess, I can't really fault them too much for the whole Florida thing because it was people in Japan who made and designed Blanca. But nevertheless, like, it's always weird to me when they're like, we are a culture that often is on the receiving end of this, and yet here we are perpetuating it towards other cultures. The cycle goes round and round. Horizon Zero Dawn, this one's an interesting example. The first game drew a lot of criticism for using the terms such as braves, primal, savage when talking about the Nora culture, right? Their fictional Nora culture. And they had a lot of imagery in both their architecture and in their clothing that was reminiscent of Native Americans. Now, the developers, but the main character was a white girl, redheaded white girl with freckles, right? Like wearing clothing and using weaponry that was, again, and being called a brave, which was all very much like, this is Native American stuff. Why not just make the character Native American? Is a great question. The developers were like, no, Guerrilla was like, no, we were making up an entirely new culture that would be, like true to what it would be like, emerging in this world. And it's like, yeah, but what are your subconscious appropriating influences, right? Like that's sort of to me, this is, if that's true, which I cannot believe it was true across the board, right? Like you cannot look at me and say that the hundreds of people involved in that were not just ripping off of cultures they're familiar with. But even if that was true, clearly there's some kind of subconscious, like, yeah, this is clearly what you think when you think primitive culture. That is a form of appropriation, right? When you think, primitive culture, they must have Native American stuff. Like,
Isn't brave a Scandinavian thing with the red hair and the?
Brave.
Disney...
Yeah, that's called brave, but they don't call her a brave. A brave is like a term for a Native American warrior. It'd be the same for like samurai or knight, right? This is what braves would be. So
interesting.
This is all very disappointing.
Yeah, right.
Cool. Let's talk about some games. Let's talk about games that did this above board, though. Games that were maybe accused of cultural appropriation when they actually did sort of approach it from this sort of humble aspect, or have plausible deniability regarding their like excuses for it. The one that I think both of us agreed on pretty much right out of the bat was Ghost of Tsushima, made by Sucker Punch, a Western developer, representing not just Japanese culture, but Japanese history, an actual historical event that happened. And this is one of those things where it's like, let's talk about our benchmarks. What are benchmarks of cultural appreciation over appropriation? The benchmark to me is always like, do people of that culture actually appreciate it and feel respected by what you did? And Japanese people loved Ghost of Tsushima. They praised it. They were big fans of it. And it's because the developers did the work. So they were also they were also trying to emulate an artist of that culture. So they were trying to represent Akira Kurosawa's filmmaking. And also, but they also didn't want to just do that and then still not do their homework. They researched the crap out of the island of Tsushima and its history and culture.
So much so that the island of Tsushima invited Sucker Punch, right? Or like allotted them. And what was the...
It was because
there was
there was a damaged arch, and this arch was represented in the game. Yeah, it was one of the shrines or whatever, and they
raised money to fix it.
And they raised money. Well, but like Sucker Punch didn't do it. They just like raised awareness that this was a thing, and then when the word got out that there was this fundraiser for it, they raised so much more money than they would have otherwise because of a bunch of Western fans who were like, "Let's throw money at this thing that we love," and that's cool. So they sort of honorarily like, hey, thanks for raising awareness about our island, even though you weren't actually trying to raise awareness about this issue. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's really, really cool, and definitely a metric of not appropriation. Definitely.
Yeah. Your example of Assassin's Creed, we'll harken back to that. You said they had a Mohawk consultant.
That's one example of things they've done. Yeah,
and they didn't
refuse to trademark culturally sensitive names. Yeah,
it's very good. That it does win it some points in my book. Sifu, this is one I saw come up where it got blasted for cultural appropriation, but then kind of there was sort of a counter backlash that was like, no, this is a game that's what Slow Clap is doing is trying to, like, again, similar to Ghost of Tsushima, they're picking a very specific style of film and they're just trying to recreate that in a video game context. They're not trying to say anything about Chinese culture at all. And in fact, unlike Horizon Zero Dawn, they're casting they could have easily cast that game as a white guy, but no, they chose to be like, no, let's also be true to the racial reality of this culture, this kung fu culture. And so I think it's probably a gray area. I think they probably don't get everything right, but I think that they're not necessarily coming in and being like, disrespect to Chinese people. Cool. Awesome. Well, let's get into some of our questions about why. We'll kind of close off there. Close off with, I'll merge these two questions together. But why is it important for developers and consumers to have a healthy and appropriate understanding of cultural appropriation? And then what are common sense ways to avoid, mitigate instances of cultural appropriation, and treat the source culture with respect?
Ooh, good questions. It is important for developers and consumers to have a healthy, appropriate understanding of what this is, cultural appropriation, because developers need. There's two-sided coin here. Developers can fall into pitfalls, into traps, and they can be lambasted and raked through the coals on like a cyberpunk level of like weaponized consumers demeaning and bashing their reputation, and then they'll be kicked out and like no publishers will pick them up. So it's like a business risk, and that's the most stupid, shallow capitalist way of looking at the risk. Exactly. But that's a thing.
Don't
like
get
that's
caught.
There. Right?
Yeah.
And so like that's a developer a developer's motive to not do that. And then the other side of that coin is you have such an opportunity to raise awareness and make a difference in the world with your talent.
Ghost of Tsushima.
Like Ghost of Tsushima did.
Child.
And yeah. And so why not tell a unique story? Because there's so much stuff that's like not even been touched. You mentioned the Cold War. What about a Cold War game from an Islam perspective? A person on the streets of a random city from an Islamic country, like who has family and love and culture, but is affected by the Cold War's problems. You know, like
during the Cold War, we armed Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda to fight the Russians. It's like, let's see that story. Let's see that story, right? Like, like
there's so much out there. That's not just like the mainstream colonial
at the end of the day,
white.
It's like we treat our own culture as if it's full of all these different people with all completely different points of view and nuanced beliefs and nuanced like things they love, and we won't do that for other cultures. We just were like, yeah, but no, they all love pizza because they're Italian, obviously. It's like, no, why don't you accurately portray the fact that let's play a game with an Italian character and his thing is he hates pizza, right? At the very least. So that may be, again, that may be reductive in its own way, but at least that is better than just being like, clearly all Italians love pizza. Like, why isn't he just like, he absolutely hates the stereotype that Italians love pizza. And he's like, pizza is garbage. It's garbage food. I hate it. I hate you. That's a cool character. That's an interesting character. That's a dynamic character. And I just pulled that out of my butt.
Right.
But the point is like there's so many more interesting stories to tell, right? From a sheer creative perspective, if you just do the homework, do the time, interview people of that culture, you'll probably get a better, cooler end product anyways, because the more people that collaborate and contribute to this thing, like the better in this realm, in this aspect.
Yeah. And here is the most important reason why developers should be aware of what cultural appropriation is. To look at their own corporate executive team, look out at that desk. Who are the shareholders and who are the people running the show? And if you see nothing but white people, you should change that. That's why you should know what cultural appropriation is. Yeah. Let some other people at the table, open that door, bring other folks up, create opportunities, look out at your culture, look out at your employer, your employees, look out at the world, and like do better. That's it. Like that's why developers should know what this is.
I think people hear that and they say, so you're saying I should just give my job to someone just because they're black? It's like, no, that's not what we're saying. We're saying find the black.
Close-minded response.
That's a very, very close-minded response. It's saying, no, find someone who is black in your culture. And we're not saying give them your job. We're saying empower them to make the thing they want to make or do the thing they want to do or have the perspective, give them a voice at the very least to say how things can change. That's it, right? Like, we're not saying that you have to then suddenly have a bunch of black shareholders, although would that be such a bad thing, right? It's not saying that you have to have a bunch of Islamic shareholders, though. Would that be such a bad thing? No. But at the same time, at least give those people a voice. Make sure to hire more of those people, at the very least, so they have the opportunity to advance into the position that you have. Give them those opportunities. Don't stonewall them, right? Like, that's essentially what we're saying is like, try to give people the same opportunities you were privileged enough to have. And then also, again, that's not
I think cultural appropriation would go away. Cultural appropriation would go away on its own. Like, because you'd have a mixed, diverse voice for creative efforts, and you would have representation from various cultures.
When
and you'd have input.
When the Smite developers come and show off their new, this is an example we didn't have, where there are like active religious figures. The game is about like gods fighting each other, right? Like, and there are active religious figures that are worshipped today that like Smite comes in and is like, ha, now those are cool characters for us to use. And I think I used the example to you. And then like for some of the female ones, they like sexualize them. So I said to you, I was like, it'd be like if they were like, our new character is Jesus in a banana hammock. That is like,
Yeah.
sorry,
Like,
parents,
what?
for explaining what that is. But like that's what it would be the equivalent of. And anyways, the point being is like having someone on the table, you know, if that were to happen, if that exact scenario were to happen, I bet you like 5 white people would raise their hand and be like, no, you can't do that. Now imagine if you had 5 Islamic people at the table when they tried to do some ancient Islamic religious figure or whatever, and they'd be like, no, no,
Yeah.
that's not cool for us, right? Yeah, that's what we're saying is like it mitigates these things. I wouldn't say it would entirely cure it, but it would mitigate it, and so that's a common sense way. Obviously, education, right? Learning, making a big effort to like hire people to come in and consult, right? And not just that, like pay for the developers to go visit the culture that you're trying to make a game out of, right? Like those developers should have an entire week of pre-production where they just go visit and learn and immerse themselves in it, right?
More than a week. That should be ongoing.
They should design the game in that place, right? Like
exactly.
Like, is that expensive? Yes.
But what? Yeah.
But it can be a costly mistake. So you know what? Like maybe it's worth the cost. So anyways, and can you imagine how amazing that would be for those developers? Probably.
Yeah.
Or they'd be like, oh crap, my computers are all back at home though. Like my computers are back in the office. I can't actually design these things. Anyways, so yeah, it's I think it's an important thing. It's not something I think it's important before people accuse us of being like too woke or whatever. It's I think it's important to recognize that people have valid concerns about these things, right? Like they're not just complaining because they want a virtue signal. They're not just complaining because they want to make other people feel bad for being white, right? Like that's the thing. That's what people always say. Oh, critical race theory is just to make white kids feel bad for being white. No, that's not the point. The point is these things happen, right? We could just pull up Wikipedia. That we could go through the Wikipedia's best list and probably say, cultural appropriation, right? Appropriation. And the point isn't to point fingers. The point is to say like it's disrespectful. And when the tables are turned, when they're flipped, and people disrespect you. I mean, how many people like cry foul anytime someone like criticizes America, right?
Right.
Like that's how it feels. That's how it feels to other people, except there's not a bunch of people being like, how dare they criticize America? Instead, it's like just a bunch of Americans being like, yes, that was great. That was such a good representation of your crappy culture. Like it's
right.
It can be frustrating, and just being able to have the empathy to put yourself in someone else's shoes. It's a muscle that needs to be exercised. So we should all at least take time to try to exercise that muscle.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we're at. Penguin soap. I haven't had a good soapbox in a while.
Again, highlighting we've highlighted race a lot here and like cultural from different countries.
Yep.
But really in America, there are oppressed cultures, and that is the LGBTQ, the trans community, the bi and queer community, and etc. Like those people have voices, and we want to hear their stories too. And there's been a lot of
people too,
neurodivergent people. And so
I think of like a great example we didn't hit on in Mass Effect 2. Mass Effect 2. It's a terrible, awful, just ugly representation of a autistic person. And and it's a heartbreak. I remember playing that DLC and being like, this is messed up.
Yeah.
And so that's not cool too. So yeah, neurodivergent
communities, and then like ableism or like people who are handicapped or physically disabled in other ways, like let's represent their voices and their culture as well and the things they're struggling with.
And not just appropriate it and be like, rocket wheelchair. Like, no. I know it's tempting. Yeah. I know rocket wheelchair sounds cool. It's tempting, but it's probably offensive to people in wheelchairs. So who rely on those things.
So if you go back and you re-listen to our entire discussion and you just replace like another country with another oppressed people inside of various countries around the world, we're also talking about that too. So again, development companies, publishing companies, people who are making games, putting money on, like look at your board, look at your creative team, look at your writers, animators, developers, and look and make sure there's equitable opportunity across all aspects of what you are looking to represent.
Yep.
And you will avoid cultural appropriation.
You will mitigate cultural appropriation.
Yes.
I will not guarantee anyone will ever avoid culture. We probably culturally appropriated in this episode in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
So that's how pervasive it is, and that is how paved the road to hell is with good intentions. So with that, we want to hear how you all pave your road. Do you pave it with good intentions? Do you pave it with yellow bricks? Do you pave it with saltstone, limestone, granite countertops? That's not what we want to hear. I'm sick, guys, so please bear with me. We want to hear what you think. What are your thoughts on cultural appropriation? Do you think it's a bunch of woke nonsense, or do you think it's an important topic and you think that we should all try to be better and more empathetic people? The answer is number 2 in this case, but we will at least hear and read your comments to the contrary, but you got to engage with us. So listen to Termite as to where you can yell at us if you want to.
You can yell at us over at 80bitpodsmash.com, 80bitpodsmash.com. That's our landing website where we have links to all of our social media outlets for yelling: Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, Twitter, and Discord. There's yelling across all of these platforms. Go check them out. Even if you don't want to see us, just go to those platforms and look at the yelling. Just go look at it because it's all there.
Yeah. Wait, let's pretend like there's yelling. Yeah, there's so much yelling, guys. Go watch the yelling happen and maybe yell a little bit. Maybe yell at us before you read that there's yelling. So that way,
surprise, there's yelling.
That way, we can trick you when you find out there's actually no yelling. Did I derail
also, on our website, we have links to all of our audio podcast platforms because we are actually indeed a weekly podcast. So if you're finding us on YouTube or Twitch or however, maybe you found the business card in a coffee shop or a brewery and you found us, we have a weekly podcast. It drops every Monday at midnight. It's always about topics and video games and things. And we're on Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Google Play, Apple Podcasts. And our RSS feed is available to throw in any app you would like. And all of that stuff, all of it, is at 80BIT-Podsmash, 80bitpodsmash.com.
Huzzah! Next week, it will be October. Oh, it's October now. Next week will be another Monday in October. And I guess 3 out of the 5 Mondays this month are Halloween themed because we're super excited about Halloween. This one, though, is a mix between a Halloween themed episode and the start of a brand new series. Since we finished the Wikipedia one, we felt like we could start a new series. This is one I've been wanting to do for a while, but I wanted to talk about emotions in video games. So talking about video games that exemplify an emotion or do a really good job evoking that emotion or are somehow about that emotion, ideally more from a psychological perspective than a surface perspective. So not just being like, yeah, this was a sad game. It's like, no, what does this game say about sadness from a psychological perspective? What we learned from it. So I call the series Press F for Feelings, and the Halloween aspect comes in because I was about to talk about, or I originally labeled this one for grief, especially after coming out of the wake of Ryan. But then I was like, wait a minute, it's October. We should do fear. So we're going to talk about psychological fear. What is it? Fear, of course, being the one single unifying emotion we all have. Everyone is afraid of something. It is built into our biological evolutionary selves to be afraid of things. Some of it's good fear, some of it's bad fear, but fear is universal. So we're going to talk about that and more next week.
All right. See you next week.